We know how it feels to be violent and to feel that you are protecting your family, your people, and so on.
Hen Alon served in the Israel Defense Forces during the First and Second Intifada, until he came to believe that the IDF was oppressing Palestinians and eventually refused to serve.
We tried to solve it by violence, by the IDF us or them.
As a teenager in the West Bank, Sulaiman Khatib went to prison for more than 10 years for his role in stabbing and wounding 2 Israeli soldiers. It was there that he was introduced to nonviolent resistance.
We can dehumanize whoever we want, but at the end of the day, believe me, we are all able to be the evil in town and to be the good people in town.
Khatib and Alon laid down their weapons and helped create Combatants for Peace.
Somewhere in 2004 and 5, we found out that we have a common goal. We are 18 years in this journey of building the trust and developing nonviolence as a philosophy, as an alliance between us. We are in one of the most or deepest, lowest points in the conflict. I wanted to quit on October 7th. I said, no, this is too much. I can't bear it anymore. And then I got a phone call from Jamil, from Suli, from others saying, what are we doing? I feel such a deep sense of responsibility to hold on to humanity and hope.
We have been in touch every day since the Black Saturday. I care about Khen family like I care about my family. I can't really divide my mind and heart and soul anymore. We have some Israelis that have lost friends or family. We had Ahmed Hilo, and he already lost more than 25 members of his family in Gaza.
I see everything collapsing around us. We don't know what to say yet, but we are here. The only responsibility that we have is not to give up hope and our humanity.
What we want is really a system change. Without that system change, even if we can imagine a world without Hamas, the violence will come back.
This is the opportunity, not ceasefire and not a temporary agreement. This is the moment to solve the problem. And it's solvable. We can live together on this land between the river and the sea.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. The killings, cruelty, and devastation mount in Gaza, with no end in sight and with no real plan to create a lasting peace after this current cycle of violence and vengeance temporarily ends. Unique among the many ideas proposed to end and control the violence are the ideas and activism of my 2 guests on the Radical Imagination today. They call for a peacemaking, developing a culture of peace that would be a comprehensive project of healing and rehumanization, a widespread process to reverse the effects of oppression and dehumanization of the other, which have been fueling the hatred and violence for decades. It's seen as a project of liberation for both sides, shared values and a common ground based on the mutual affirmation that both peoples have a past and a future in the land, and that neither side should be subject to the violence or oppression of the other. Avner Wishnitzer and Sulaiman Khatib are co-founders of Combatants for Peace, a group composed of people from both sides of the conflict who have committed to nonviolence and peaceful coexistence. Avner is a professor of history at Tel Aviv University and is a former member of Seyarat Matkal, one of the Israeli Defense Forces elite commando units. Suli is a local organizer who lives in Ramallah and serves on the board of Alam, the Day After, an organization of Israeli and Palestinian artists. He spent more than 10 years in an Israeli prison after being arrested as a teenager for an attack on 2 Israeli soldiers. The two recently co-authored a piece for the New York Review of Books on modeling a nonviolent path toward peace. Launched in 2006, Combatants for Peace is the only movement worldwide that was founded by former fighters on both sides of an active conflict. They were nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2017 and 18, and it's a model that needs to be taken around the world to end the useless and unnecessary cycles of violence experienced by millions. Enormous respect, enormous admiration, and let's just get into this. It's such an unusual organization and unique, and let's give our audience a little bit of an idea of how you both developed the organization, how you came from such different backgrounds to now unite in this struggle. Avner, you want to go first, or okay? Tell us a little about your background.
First of all, thanks for having us. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here.
My honor.
So, Combatants for Peace was started originally in 2005 already by a group of Israelis who had served in the Israeli army in combatant roles and had refused to serve in the occupied territories, most of them during the Second Intifada, so beginning of the 2000s. From the Palestinian side, it was mostly ex-prisoners who had served time in Israeli prison for their involvement in the armed struggle. So personally, I grew up in a kibbutz. I became, I was a teenager during the first Intifada, so the late 1980s, and I never supported Israeli occupation, although I didn't have a very good idea of what it was. When my time to join the army came, I volunteers, like some of my friends, to one of the best units that I, in the army, and I served there, which meant pretty hard service, but also that I did not go to the West Bank.
You did. What did your unit do? What did this unit do?
Well, we did other things in other places, and I was not anymore aware of what the Israeli occupation was when I finished the army than when I started it. It was after my service, mostly, that I began to go to the West Bank as an activist with another group that began working in doing direct actions, especially in the South Hebron Hills in the early 2000s. And I was at the time a reserve soldier, still in the same unit, doing about a month of reserve service every year. And I remember going there for the very first time, almost like a spectator. I was hesitant. I was kind of afraid to be with those radicals because I was, the good boy of the kibbutz going to the, to the elite commander unit. And here I am with people who, were kind of out of the camp, beyond the pale. But what I saw there for the first time was what the occupation, which was for me kind of a theoretical, abstract notion, what it meant for people in their real daily life. And to be honest, first I found it hard to believe, and then I was ashamed. I was ashamed. I saw the people of the South Hebron Hills who have so little, and who had been driven out of their caves and very humble shelters by the military, and had to face the expansion of the settlements there. I saw water wells that have been sealed off. I saw people who'd been displaced, herds, denied access to land, and so many other things that really struck me as and the most important thing is that I realized this was not just the settlers, as I would probably like to think before. This was my country.
Not just the settlers.
No,
So
this
this
was
was
my
the-
country. This was a system.
Right.
And it was the same system I was still serving in as a reserve soldier. And this is what got me so ashamed, because I was willing or unwilling, I was part of it. And so the first thing, I mean, it took a while, but it came to a point that I knew that first thing I need to do is not participate in this, to refuse. But then I knew, and some of my friends together, we were discussing this hours on end. It's not enough to refuse. Refusing and allowing the system to continue is just washing your heads off it. And we needed to resist it. And, over time, because you can only refuse once. Once you're done with that, it has it's not effective anymore. Right. So we were looking for the way forward. Then we were approached by a group of Palestinians who were curious about this refusal movement, and they invited us to meet. We didn't know exactly who they were. They didn't know
secretly, right? This first meeting was secret.
Yes. In 2005, this was the end of the second Intifada. It was still very tense. There was a lot of violence around still. So there was a lot of suspicion. We went to Beit Jala, south of Jerusalem. I think all of us were scared on both sides. We started talking. And
is this when you met Suli?
Yes.
Suli, okay, so Suli, he's visiting your neighborhood now, and he's seeing what you're having to put up with. So how is that initial contact? What did you think? Tell us a little about your background and how you got involved in this.
Thank you, Jim, for having us. It's really an honor to speak with you. I really like your programs. So my background, I born outside of Jerusalem. My family lives outside of Jerusalem in a little town called Hizma, where my family has been living there for hundreds of years. I would say my family really indigenous to the region of Jerusalem, specifically mountains of Jerusalem. Yeah. So growing up with the local culture and folklore and history and identity and the connection to the place, to the land, to the season, to all kinds of customs. So I've been active actually since my childhood. Born and grew up under total Israeli control, the Israeli occupation control. So I grew up around Jerusalem area actually. And when I was 13, 14, I joined the armed resistance. And at the time when I was 14, my adrenaline and attraction was, Che Guevara, Arafat, and free.
Yeah, very romantic. Yeah, you were this romantic revolutionary.
I still.
Che Guevara, you're going to go in the mountains and take over, and that didn't work out. Okay, yes.
Yeah, but I'm attracted to a revolutionary vibe. Still, I would say like this is my spirit, and this is how I felt, and so I also um, did everything I could when I was 14, like in sense of like writing slogans of free Palestine and liberation of Palestine, um, preparing training on cocktail Molotov. I attacked two Israelis and that they were wounded, and so on.
Can I
Uh,
ask you, who did you look up to, if anyone, among the leadership, the Palestinian leadership at
yeah,
that point?
yeah.
Who was?
So yeah, like in the background of I'm like from I'm 51 years old, so my generation, and the background was like the Palestinian. I mentioned Arafat and also the rest of the Palestinian leaders at the time, where that was long time before Hamas started.
Yes.
Were like from different factions, like Popular Front, George Habash, Palestinian Christian revolutionary leader, like communist parties, democratic parties, and so on.
Right.
And the idea of like that I'm protecting our homeland and so on. So I was like very engaged compared to my generation in the struggle. Uh, and at the age of 14 and a half, I ended up in Israeli jail as a political prisoner. I was for a while the youngest political prisoner.
How did
Uh,
that happen? How did that happen? You're
yeah,
14 years old here.
yeah. So after we attacked, me and a friend attacked two Israeli soldiers were wounded. The Israeli army has came to search for us. We hide in a hidden place for a few days, and then they arrested all my groups. Uh, and I went. They took me to the military jail. In the occupied territory specifically. The rules there are has nothing to do with international law or human rights or prisoners' rights. The age wise, it doesn't really matter. Basically, it's a military jail, a military court.
Hmm.
So going back and forth to the court, I became 15, and I was sentenced to 15 years, almost like my age.
Wow.
So I was also active in my like this new life in jail. Of course, like the beginning of jail, and sometimes through the jail, where there was a lot of psychological and physical torture, and so I went through a lot of challenges. Of course, in one side, and the other side, I played the best of version of my Palestinian self, to say, of the
Right.
heroic. Feeling of like steadfastness, sumud, what we call it in Arabic, and the spiritual freedom I had, and the songs of they can jail our bodies, they can jail our souls. I was
Right.
not religious person, but this was the vibe at the time among the prisoners around me. So during the time of jail, I spent 10 years and 5 months in jail, and this is the time where my also family house part of it, like my room, was blocked, sealed by cement and iron as a punishment for the family.
Huh.
And I was very active in jail, as I said, like for just to highlight.
But what makes this real transition in your life now? 24, you come out, and what are you thinking? What are you feeling at that point? And then you attend this meeting. There's only what, 5 or 10 of you that was at this initial meeting. I mean, how did that happen, and what were you feeling at that time?
Yeah, so maybe just to say one thing, in jail,
Sure.
I like it's a long time. So I studied also Hebrew, learn your enemy's language, and so on. But mainly, I want to highlight one thing, and that's how I got to know about nonviolence, which is basically food hunger strike. When I was 15, I joined other prisoners in food hunger strike for 16, 17 days, no food, just water and salt, and that's basically to improve the daily life in jail, and among other reasons and journeys, and it's a long process, it's not like one day event. I went through a lot of transformation and change of like there is no military solution for our conflict, which is we are saying until now, and no and basically the idea of us or them, like I went through a lot of thinking and reading and conversations with other prisoners and so on. So when I was out of jail, I was already active in a Palestinian nonviolence community kind of thing and calling for nonviolent intifada and the second intifada, where some of my friends were fighting. And I want to make it clear here, the conversation between people that's speaking about, armed resistance versus
Right.
non-violence. This conversation will never end. It's
So
all
they didn't see you as very welcoming, right, to that perspective. Just as Avner was sort of ostracized by his people, right? In a sense, you were seen as these outside rebels, in a sense, outside the pale. I think Avner used the term, but
yeah, of course, this is
yeah,
not a mainstream ideas. And so before arriving to the meeting with the Israelis, like as Abner mentioned, I've been in certain circles, Palestinian circles, that speak about nonviolence and the need for nonviolence, and also the search for, to say, alliances in the Israeli side. Because, as Abner knows this, in both sides, people would say, oh, okay, if we do just nonviolence, what about the other side? And there is no partner in the other side. There is all of these conversations. And I think that would lead me to search for also partners in the Israeli side that believe in the same value. And that's how I got basically to the first meetings.
but it took a while with your relationship with Avner, or did this happen? Well, I don't know. How long did it take before you began to? Again, I know it's a process must have taken several meetings, perhaps, correct, before there began to be this openness and really get to know each other, or tell me about that, because this is so crucial around the world. This model that you're trying to build and promote, which we here at the Radical Imagination support 1,000,000%. We want to know how this can come about, because so many other people, both on both sides, never get to your point. So that's what's so fascinating.
So-
How can we bring so many other people in to your world and mindset? Avner, you wanna? Yeah.
I'm trying to relive these first meetings. There was fear and suspicion, but there was also tremendous curiosity and real desire to understand what things look like from the other side. And I think this was to me, it was a revelation. It was sitting in the same table with people that maybe a few years earlier I could have shot at easily, not as a metaphor, but as a real life situation. And here they are, sharing the table with me. And they were telling their stories. We were telling ours. There was nobody to facilitate the meeting. There was nobody to lead us anywhere. We didn't know where we were going with that. We didn't come there to start a new movement. We had no idea where this is going. But then spontaneously, people started telling about themselves, because we imagine a long table with maybe 20 people sitting around it. Nobody knows the others. And, so I am this and that from that place. And I grew up here and I went to the army, or I joined the armed struggle, and suddenly you get a completely different perspective of the same reality you grew up in. For me, it was the perspective of the occupied.
Yeah.
I never would have thought about these things. So on the one hand, and this is crucial for Combatants for Peace, since day one, there is occupied and occupier. We never try to erase the asymmetry in power relations. It is part of this reality that we are challenging. Okay, so that's one level, and it was clear from very early on. On the other hand, or at the same time, we are all humans. occupied and occupier alike. And we're trying to kind of rekindle that sense of humanity to undermine the power structures that allow some to dominate over the others.
Right.
And these two aspects, power relations and being very much aware of the politics and the way reality is structured on the one hand, and then a vision that puts actual human being on the front, and realizing that the soldiers are also humans. Maybe they are part of an oppressive system. That's what they do. This is what me and my friends were doing.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So we came from there. We came from the violence, and we never forget that.
Right.
So that's one aspect we already mentioned. That is the aspect of transformation that is crucial for Combatants for Peace. We are all transformed in one way or another, and transformation never ends. It never ends. So I mentioned this early revelation, but this was just, it's like a first date,
Yeah.
It takes for ages to really understand the complexities and the depths, and how deep oppression and violence run down into our souls.
And you're trying to deal with generations of past traumas of others as well. I'm just curious for both of you. Did you have much family support? And also, do you consider either one of you very religious in that more traditional sense? Or were there basically more secular individuals drawn to this? Because you do mention in your article in the New York Review that there are extremists on both sides, and it seems like they're rooted in very different distortions, if you will, of religious reality, and that's part of the problem. But so, did you have much family support? What did your families think about this? And also, again, what role does religion, if any, plays in this, in your discussions?
Mm-hmm. I'm personally like a spiritual person, I would say. Of course, I come from a Muslim family, traditional Muslim family, and basically we grew up with Abrahamic faiths, which is like Islamic, Judaism, Christianity, that born in the land where we're coming from, and they all interconnected somehow. No, definitely, I don't think Palestinian-Israeli conflict, whatever we call it, is really a religious conflict. I don't buy this. Definitely, religion is part of the story and the history and the narratives of all sides, of course. And as far as I can say right now about this, that religion could be used as a strategy, as a fuel, as adrenaline for this or that direction. That's what I know. And for that to say, um, I do believe like the religion and other resources, tribal resources and other local culture has to be used um in order to find solutions. There are a lot of ancient wisdom in the region that we carry, that our families and our communities know through the history of our region and the world and the human as whole, that can really provide a platform of different like path and solutions um for our cause in generally. And I just want to say the reaction of our families and communities and friends around us, which is, as I've mentioned, also change. It's not always the same, but usually, let me say this, because we started our first meetings during the second Tifada. So usually, working with the enemy is like something not a mainstream. It's not something accepted, as we know. So we don't really choose a rosy road. We know this is not gonna be easy. It's gonna be a long journey, and sometimes we got a lot of criticism from our surrounding.
Yeah.
Uh, Even though I really believe the majority of our population, if they're giving the opportunity, they are just like any other human group of people that just want to live
So
there.
important to hear. Yeah, that's profound. That's, and I also appreciate very much your uh, mentioning how religion does not have to be the enemy. It's the distortions of that human spirit on both sides that can be the problem. Um, did you want to?
Let me just add, I'm not a religious
Sure.
person at all,
Okay.
but some of the most, devoted anti-occupation activists are religious, and they draw on their religious convictions in their struggle for a better world. So I fully agree with Suli. Religion, in itself, is not the enemy. On the contrary, it could be enlisted.
Yeah.
I mean, we never forget that Martin Luther King was was a pastor. I mean, of course, religion can work in any direction. Um,
That's so important, what you're just saying, right? I just wanted to also mention, I mean, we have, listen, we have a lot of the same things going on in our country here. Reverend William Barber, as you perhaps know, has also been challenged or challenging what he considers a distorted vision of Christianity among some of the fundamentalists that he comes in contact with. And by the way, many of them also support the settler movement in Israel too, as well. So that gets more again more complicated. But your point is well taken. There can be distortions and contradictions at every level used by all kinds of people for whatever reasons. And I like so much what you're trying to say here. Look, you get together and speak the truths that you understand, and let's cut through the BS. And that sounds like what you were doing in that initial meeting and what you're continuing doing. And that's what we all need to do. And it is a long process.
it is indeed, and what I wanted to two more points that are crucial. I mean, we mentioned it, but I wanna kind of emphasize them. We mentioned transformation, but transformation can only happen over a long period of time, and it happens in Combatants for Peace through the interaction with the other side. So that's the other main point I want to make. It is joint movement. It is a joint movement, and it's joint activism, despite the power asymmetry, challenging this power asymmetry. So in the world around us, Israelis dominate over Palestinians. In Combatants for Peace, the way the movement is structured and the way it operates and the way it takes decisions is a direct challenge to this reality of oppression, because we take all decisions on equal terms and we try to actually listen to each other, which in the reality in which we live is a radical choice.
Yeah.
As mundane as it may sound. So what I'm trying to say is that we try to embody the future we see as desired. It is not that we talk about this future. It is we try to model it. We try to live it. We try to exemplify how it could be done. And if we who have been part of the violence can do it, so can anybody else. So that's the second point. The joint activism is crucial. It is also crucial because this is what sticks. At the end of the day, my friendship with Suli is what allows us to go through these terrible days. It is personal bonding across the lines. And by now, there are no lines. The lines, I mean,
Yeah.
we are on the same side, even though Suli, as I mentioned several times, lives a very different reality. So this joint activism is both a vision and a practice that is designed to maintain a committed community of activists. And here, the nonviolence comes in, and that's the third thing. Nonviolence, of course, is a huge tradition. I'm not going to go into that. The point is that it is also what allows us to work together. So it's also crucial for the inner, the internal work of combatants. So how can we act if it's not if nonviolence is the basic condition on which we agree? So these are the three main principles that I wanted to
very good. And so you unlearn. What you're doing is you're getting involved in unlearning the distortions and the violent culture that we are so much part of. Let me just throw this in at a macro level. What would you like to see, both of you, America's role in this? I just had a conversation with Cornell about this the other day, but I'd like to hear what you would say, because he's come out very strongly, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But what would you like to see America do? What do you see its role being in moving what you're trying to do forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a question of me. Always been asked. Like, I have to say, like, we believe like different world, a kinder world, a nicer world is possible, and not just for us Palestinians and Israelis, which we share this piece of land, but beyond that, for humanity and for a global change. I really believe in a global change, and I'm actually optimistic. I see a system change is really needed in the world, and that's what I see right now, actually, despite the bloodshed and what's happening right now in Gaza, unfortunately. And in that sense, I believe the role of America as a biggest, strongest country and American people is centrally important. Um, yeah, and in our micro conflict, um, I'm really, like, I have to say, like, to be truthfully and honestly, I think the American policy, foreign policy is something, and the American people are something different. I have to differentiate. We've been a few times in the US, like doing speaking tours and meetings, and we meet a lot of alliances and a lot of people. We have a lot of supporters, actually, in the US.
Yes.
And we have American Friends of Combatants for Peace, which also a call for people that want to be in touch with us. They can also be in touch with us through that. And we do sometimes lobbying work and other work. I would really like to see like really practical steps that the United States takes in support for our cause of freedom and liberation. And that means many strategies that they can do, to be a fair moderate if we talk about the American formal policy. And that's not what we see in the last war now and before, to be truth.
Yeah. Well put. Avner, do you want to comment on that a little bit, or as a historian here?
I would say two things. First of all, on the official policy level, I think going back to the way Israel has been allowed to operate over decades in the West Bank, creating this discriminatory system that is the reality of millions of people over decades, and Israel has been was allowed to create and develop this system with impunity. There was never any problem, and millions of people are subjected to it, and thousands of Palestinians have been killed over the years, many of them for opposing this system. And I think this should not be allowed to continue, because this undermines any prospect of future agreement. At the same time,
Let me ask you specifically, Avner, if I may. Do you feel this is we haven't gotten to that term yet, but here it is. Do you feel this is a distortion? The Israeli government's position is a distortion of Zionism? Or is it there's something
Oh,
inextricably was whose side there? Was there a collective side?
yes, because I feel also maybe talking also as a historian, movements of any kind have different potentialities within them,
Right.
and it's particular historical processes that determine which of these potentials would come to be, become dominant. And I'm afraid over the last 30 or 40 years, it's the more, even more violent and now also right-wing religious fundamentalist Jewish approaches that have become dominant, unashamedly Jewish supremacy approaches that have become normalized. And so this trajectory is becoming, is determining much of what happens. Now, it was probably there, or some of this was there from day one in Zionism, because they came to a land that they had to, in their view, settle and colonize. But I think these trajectories have become much more pronounced. We can also look at Hamas, by the way, as a movement that had different potentials within it. Looking at its parent movement, the Muslim Brotherhood, which was very kind of conservative in many ways, and look where it is now. Look at the kind of things they did on October 7th, that so many Muslims around the world, if they acknowledge it, and many deny, but say this is un-Islamic, this is against religion.
Yeah.
I mean, sexual assault, killing of children and elderly, and all of these things. So
they hijacked.
This was what Hamas was meant to be, or is it something that Hamas turned into? I don't know, but this is what they are now. So we have to work with that. We have to. This is reality right now.
Right. So as Barbara would say, there's a hijacking of the goodness of the universality message of Islam as well. I've got a couple other very, very important points I want to get. I'm curious as to what you think about the left, the so-called left here in America, and some of our campus protests. But before I ask you about that, I did want to bring in a news article here that about Cornell West, and this is from the Detroit News. I think it was there yesterday. Hundreds turn out in Dearborn for interfaith rally to call for end to siege in Gaza. Political activist, academic, and author Cornell West joined Michigan Task Force for Palestine on Tuesday to call for an end to the siege of Gaza and a permanent ceasefire in the territory. To begin his speech here, I'm not going to read this whole thing. Oh, what a blessing, what an honor, what a privilege to be here. Dearborn, Michigan. He said to a cheering crowd, brothers and sisters, in the face of overwhelming hatred, as well as terror, as well as trauma. I think both of you have said this so well. The challenge becomes, can we respond to hatred without hating others? And then a little later on, again, this is an interfaith event. So there were rabbis and ministers and so on. Rabbi Alana Albert, leader of one of the congregations in Dearborn, said the horrifying massacres of Israelis by Hamas produced the murder of mostly civilians. The war machine roared into overdrive, raining down incalculable death and destruction. One person interrupted her to challenge whether Hamas had killed the Israelis, shouting, "That is debatable." Another person called out, "Stop." Now here's, I think, the most important point. The rabbi says, who does it serve to pit Jews and Palestinians against each other? We are here to publicly affirm a vision of safety through solidarity. I'd love you both to comment on that. And those sorts of efforts. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. This is beautiful to hear about this event anyway.
Yeah.
That people still come together from all faiths to call for ceasefire and end the war. Uh, I have to say, like, the experience is teaching us right now a few things, but the main points may be that managing the conflict is a fooling policy, is not working. And people, and especially politicians and international community, has to move from managing the conflict and the siege in Gaza and other arrangements in West Bank and elsewhere
Yeah.
not working, and we have to move to a real historical political solution, and that's what we need. Otherwise, we'll keep going in this circle. The
I
second
love
thing,
your phrase, right? Rehumanization, a rehumanization of us all, a peace culture, right? Is that what you're getting at?
yeah, and actually we have to yes, I think like all sides, we have to move into uh, a peace reality that change the reality on the ground so people can taste what peace is, because most of our population lived and born under the occupation and in this conflict. And I want to say also, in Combatants for Peace, since October 7 until now, October 8, October until where we are right now, we're really trying to hold space and empathy space for um, for the pain, whether Israeli or Palestinian, without going into competitive narrative, victimhood, who's more victim. And the atrocity from here doesn't legitimize the atrocity from there. So this is really important for us to hold this humanistic, moral approach. And this is really coming from a very moral values that we believe as a human we have to show our morality, especially at this time. And that's where our generosity, our love, our compassion, our uh, support for life comes right now. And also um, really show empathy and solidarity with people in need. And I think this is the essence of even religion. I'm not religious, but that's very important right now, to show solidarity with each other. And I really believe that our freedom and liberation is interconnected. And in a historical view, Avner here is the historian, but I also studied a lot of history in my jail time. And I know like Arab and Jewish have lived together like 14 centuries, and not like a perfect life, but honestly, we have a story to tell, that
Yeah.
what we are dreaming to see happened already. It's not new that we could live next to each other in coexistence and freedom and safety for everybody.
Beautiful. Yeah.
If I
Well,
can,
that,
if I can add, I fully agree with Suli and everything he said, and especially this point of, the atrocities committed by Hamas do not legitimize Israeli oppression, and Israeli oppression does not legitimize the atrocities committed by Hamas. I mean, and this is my beginning of an answer to your question about the left in the US. I think, maybe Suli will I don't know, we'll see what he says. Um, Often what we see is the same mentality of either them or them. It's either us or them, and still pitting us in opposing sides, and having us play our roles the way they perceive it. And um, I think this is not helpful. We need to begin with the truth. And the truth is, for example, that Israel has been, for decades, maintaining this oppressive system and expanding the settlements regarding of all, peace process, peace talks, and all of that. That's a truth. It is a truth that Gaza was under siege, but it's also a truth that Hamas took over Gaza and fired rockets on civilians. It's a truth that the brutality of the 7th of October was beyond imagination. We need to look at all of these truths. And what I see very often in the public discussion in the US is that each side kind of picks the truths that are more comfortable to his argument. So they are tailoring the reality according to their arguments. No, we need to look the reality in its eyes. And that means, for example, recognizing the brutalization that both societies are undergoing. And once again, not erasing the power dynamics. Power dynamics are part of it.
Yeah.
But they're not all of it. We insist in Combatants for Peace that there is always agency, there's always choice.
Yeah.
You don't have to kill children. You don't have to bomb civilians. It's a matter of choice. There's always a choice. And we cannot relegate our moral responsibility to others. We cannot say, oh, we were forced to do that.
Yeah.
No matter the situation. So,
and I must say, we as professors also have miserably failed in this. You can see that in the students in the so-called elite colleges. Susanna Heschel, by the way, is one of the very few who've been carrying on the sort of realistic dialogue and the Department of Middle East Studies there at Dartmouth. And they've had least disruptions and least violence among students than all the other Ivies put together. So I couldn't agree with you more. It's not the students' fault, but you see this lack of real education, and I blame the spineless administrators and the professors for not doing their job. They're not doing that. So you two are really carrying the ball here. We need to do that very, very much. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I maybe to say one, I agree with what Avner said, and the second, yeah, I agree that actually living our truth, especially we are talking at this moment, the timing we're talking, and it's a time of truth, really. It's a historical moment, and it's very like a colorful moment from different ways, very sad, very deep, and very hopeful also. I'm like really speaking like from a grounding place, seeing that the system we know is shaking and changing, and I believe like the system that basically also in the United States but also elsewhere, us or them, the good guys in town, the bad guys in town, this Hollywood movie has to change basically, and always to find that enemy to blame. I think we carry everything. And even the other day, we had a meeting for Combatants for Peace last Friday. And as Avner said, like we shared how we feel, every one of us. And it's interesting, like to see that when we even talk about nonviolence, it's not we come from a different DNA. Everyone is able to change. Everyone can choose to change. And we definitely have to allow, and it's legitimate to dream in a world that we want to live in beyond the rules that we know right now, the system that we know
So
right
beautiful, radical imagination, and
now. Radical love. Yeah.
yeah.
Healing.
Last word in the few seconds we have. We're almost out of time. How do people reach you? How can our audience reach you?
well, they can reach us through the American Friends of Combatants for Peace. If they are in the US, they can reach us through Facebook and other social media.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. And go and watch Disturbing the Peace. Look for it online. A wonderful, wonderful documentary by Stephen Apgon. Highly recommended. It really shows, I think it really catches the essence of what we've been talking about today.
Thank you so very much. You two are just simply amazing. I can't tell you enough how I've enjoyed hearing you, and you are really the hope of the world here in that sense. So thank you very much for being on the Radical Imagination. We'll hope to see you again very, very soon. This is Jim Vrettos, and thanking you for watching us here on The Radical Imagination. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.